Bang! The gavel slammed against polished oak, sharp as a gunshot, vibrating through the courtroom walls. People flinched. A woman in the second row dropped her phone, the clatter echoing louder than it should have. The judge, late 60s, silver hair combed neat, face red and rigid, leaned forward with veins showing in his neck. His voice thundered, louder than the wood beneath his hand. Life! The word cracked through the air like lightning. Gasps rose, a ripple moving across the crowded benches, dozens of phones lifted, tiny red dots glowing. This wasn't just a trial anymore, it was a spectacle. And at the center of it all stood a boy. 17, black, slim frame wrapped in a plain gray hoodie, blue jeans, white sneakers, wrists bound in cold metal cuffs. He didn't flinch, not when the gavel struck. Not when the word life rained down like a sentence already carved in stone. His eyes dark, steady, fixed on the judge, unwavering. A calm so out of place it became unsettling. Around him, the courtroom pulsed with judgment. Whispers, smirks, the sound of someone stifling a laugh. Two officers flanked him, one hand gripping his arm too tightly, the other resting near a holster as if this boy, chained, could ever be a threat. The judge raised his gavel again as though preparing to crush silence itself. His face twisted into a mask of power, but also of something else, fear hiding beneath arrogance. And still the boy did not move. He breathed slow, steady, eyes unblinking. The silence stretched, heavy, broken only by the faint hum of air vents and the tremble of someone's ringtone vibrating in a purse. The boy's calmness was louder than the judge's fury. People leaned closer. Phones angled higher, sensing something was about to break. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below, and if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change, and we're glad you're here. Now, back to him, because what you're witnessing is not just a trial, it's a test. And in the next few minutes, this quiet boy in a hoodie dismissed, restrained, underestimated will remind this courtroom, this city, and perhaps this nation, that justice is not given, it's taken back, and it begins right here. The boy stood in the center of the courtroom like a shadow pulled into the light. His hoodie was plain gray, no logos. His jeans faded at the knees, sneakers scuffed from city pavement. Nothing about him screamed wealth. Nothing whispered power. And that was the point, because no one here knew, no one guessed. They saw a young black teenager, handcuffed, accused, already judged. What they didn't see was the lineage stitched into his last name. They didn't see the man waiting beyond these walls, his father, a billionaire CEO who built an empire brick by brick, now serving as the United States Attorney General, the very architect of the justice system that had just declared his son guilty. The boy knew this irony well. He tasted it like metal in his mouth. Around him, the courtroom buzzed. Eyes pierced him, not with curiosity but with certainty. To them, this wasn't a trial, it was confirmation. Confirmation that a hoodie in a courtroom equals guilt. Confirmation that brown skin plus plain clothes equals danger. One officer holding his arm smirked as if the verdict was entertainment. The other tugged the cuffs like reins, treating the boy less like a person, more like an animal to be led. But the boy didn't break eye contact with the bench. The judge leaned back, still breathing heavy from the sentence he'd thundered. His silver hair caught the overhead lights, but the brightness did nothing to soften his face. Every wrinkle cut deeper when twisted by disdain. He looked at the boy the way one looks at a stain on white marble, something to be scrubbed out, not understood. The boy remembered this look. He had seen it in a grocery store when a clerk followed him down the aisle. He had felt it in a mall when a security guard hovered too close. And now, in the room where laws were supposed to protect him, that same look sat in the eyes of the man with the gavel. Phones tilted higher. Someone whispered, "He doesn't even look scared." Another muttered, "That stare, what's he waiting for?" What he was waiting for was patience. Because while this courtroom saw a powerless boy, he carried something heavier than fear. He carried the truth of who he was, and the certainty of who stood behind him. And soon, very soon, that truth would crash through these walls louder than any gavel. The cuffs rattled as one officer jerked the boy's arm, rougher than procedure required. He leaned in close, his breath hot with mockery. "People like you always end up here," he muttered, just loud enough for nearby rows to hear. A chuckle rolled through the benches. Someone whispered, "Exactly. Another statistic. The second officer pressed harder on the boy's shoulder, steering him as though guiding livestock. His jaw tightened, eyes narrowed, lips curved into a smirk that had nothing to do with duty and everything to do with power. The boy's feet shuffled forward only because the cuffs demanded it, but his posture straight, chin raised, refused to yield. His eyes never left the bench. The judge watched it all from above, leaning back like a king upon a throne. He tapped the gavel's handle against the desk, not to restore order but to savor control. His face flushed deeper, a storm of arrogance painted across every wrinkle. "Keep him steady," the judge barked, though the boy had not resisted. His voice cracked with the thrill of authority, the kind that feeds on silence. From the gallery, murmurs grew. Phones angled higher, catching the tight grip on the cuffs, the sneer on the officer's face. A law student in the back row whispered to his neighbor, "That's not procedure, that's theater." Still, others nodded approvingly, eager to see the verdict carried out. "About time," one man said under his breath. "Teaches them a lesson." The air thickened, tense, brittle. Every small sound became amplified, the scrape of a chair leg, the cough of an old man, the nervous tapping of a woman's nails against her phone case. And through it all, the boy's calm burned brighter. His hoodie hung loose on his shoulders, fabric plain but presence undeniable. He did not speak. He did not flinch. He stood in chains but carried himself as if the cuffs were paper. The officer's grip tightened, but the true weight in the room wasn't metal. It was judgment layered, relentless, crushing. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowed, voice low yet sharp enough to cut. "Remove him." A pause, heavy, like the moment before a storm breaks. Then the officers shifted, pulling the boy toward the door. Phones tracked their every step. The murmurs rose, a tide of curiosity, prejudice, and unease colliding all at once. And still the boy's gaze never wavered. The boy stopped moving, not by force, not by struggle, he simply stood still. The officers tugged, impatient, metal cuffs biting into his wrists. One muttered, "Don't make this harder than it already island." But the harder they pulled, the steadier he became. His hoodie brushed against the wooden rail, the gray fabric catching shadows from the chandeliers above. His sneakers squeaked faintly against the marble floor, the sound small, but his silence was louder. He did not speak. He did not beg. He lifted his chin, eyes locked on the judge. Dark, calm, immovable. The judge shifted in his chair, discomfort flashing behind arrogance. He struck the gavel lightly, tap, tap as though to reassert dominance. But the rhythm felt hollow, echoing more like nerves than control. Whispers multiplied. A woman leaned to her companion. "Why isn't he saying anything?" A man answered. "Because he knows it's over." Yet his voice lacked conviction, like he didn't believe his own words. The law student in the back shook his head. That's not the look of defeat." The boy's silence carried memory. He had learned it years ago at 15, when a mall security guard accused him of shoplifting while his hands were empty. At 13, when a teacher called the police for suspicious behavior because he waited too long by the gym doors. He had spoken then, tried to explain. No one listened. So now, he saved his words. He let the silence speak for him. One officer sneered, gripping his arm tighter. "Say something!" he hissed. But the boy only blinked slowly, as if the insult hadn't landed, as if nothing could pierce the stillness he wore like armor. The judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his lips pressed into a thin line, his knuckles white around the gavel. Authority expected fear, yet what it met was composure, and that composure was beginning to rattle the room. A cough, nervous, a phone clicking off, too self-conscious to keep filming. The murmurs shifted tone from smug certainty to uneasy curiosity. The boy inhaled once, deeply, chest rising beneath the plain cotton hoodie. Then he exhaled, slow, controlled, deliberate. The sound wasn't loud, but in the charged silence, it cut through like a verdict of its own. The judge gripped the bench tighter. The officers exchanged glances. Still, the boy said nothing. And in that nothing, the balance of power began, quietly, to move. The silence stretched until someone finally broke it. Not the boy, not the judge, but a voice from the back row. A law student, barely in his 20s, leaned toward his friend. "That's not how it's supposed to go," he whispered, notebook forgotten in his lap. His friend hushed him, but too late the words carried farther than intended. A few heads turned, frowns deepened. 2 rows closer, a woman in a navy skirt suit raised her phone higher. The red dot glowed, live streaming to the world outside these walls. She spoke under her breath, but the mic caught every syllable. "We're in courtroom 6. They just sentenced a teenager to life, and something feels very wrong." Her stream flickered onto dozens of screens within seconds. Comments rolled in. "Where is this? What did he do? He looks calm, too calm." In the gallery, murmurs thickened. Some dismissed him with a shrug. "He's guilty. Look at him. That's why he won't speak." Others tilted their heads uneasy. "No," one woman muttered. "That's not guilt. That's something else." The officers tightened their hold, aware of the lenses now locked on them. One yanked the boy's arm, muttering, "Eyes front. You don't get a stage." But the tug only highlighted his stillness, his refusal to bend. The judge noticed the phones, too. His jaw tightened, gavel tapping harder, faster. Tap, tap, tap. He wanted control, but the sound betrayed agitation. "Silence in the gallery," he ordered, voice shaking at the edges. But silence no longer belonged to him. It belonged to the boy, to the cameras, to the hundreds of eyes watching beyond the courtroom walls. The law student leaned forward again, louder this time. "He hasn't resisted once. Why are they treating him like a threat?" The officer shot him a glare, but the question landed. A ripple of agreement spread, faint but growing. The woman streaming zoomed in, her voice a low tremor. "Look at his face. He isn't afraid." She panned toward the judge, then back to the boy. But why? Why indeed? Every second, the tension shifted. It was no longer just about a verdict. It was about witnesses waking up, about strangers recognizing the cracks in a system they had been taught never to question. And the boy, hoodie gray, sneakers white, wrists bound, stood silent in the center, letting their words, not his, do the work. The courtroom doors creaked, and in strode the prosecutor mid-40s, sharp suit, voice trained to command. He walked with the certainty of someone who thought the room already belonged to him. He stopped beside the bench, cleared his throat, and raised a hand for silence. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his tone dripping with conviction, "this young man is a danger to society. His presence in this courtroom proves it. His silence proves it. He has no defense, because there is none." Applause broke from a small cluster in the gallery. Short, sharp claps, the kind that sting more than they celebrate. Others followed hesitantly, as if approval was safer than doubt. The boy did not move. The prosecutor pointed toward him, finger jabbing the air like a spear. You see it in his eyes, defiance, arrogance. He is unrepentant. He is exactly where he belongs. The judge leaned forward, nodding slightly, lips pressed thin with satisfaction. He raised the gavel again. Tap, tap. "The sentence stands," he growled, his face flushed deeper with each word. From the back, the law student shook his head. "That's not defiance," he muttered, this time louder. "That's composure." A woman across the aisle snapped back. "Composure? He's dangerous. Why else would they cuff him so tight?" The debate spread, voices layering over each other, phones tilted higher, streaming arguments as much as they streamed the trial. The gallery was no longer passive, it was divided, restless, alive. The officers shifted uncomfortably under the scrutiny. One squeezed the cuffs again, leaving a red mark on the boy's wrist. The boy inhaled, slow, steady, and looked straight ahead. The prosecutor smirked, mistaking silence for surrender. "You see?" he said, pacing now, coat flaring with each turn. "No denial, no plea, only guilt." But the cameras caught something else. They caught the stillness, the control. They caught the difference between arrogance and discipline. The judge struck the gavel once more, the sound booming through the chamber. Bang! "Enough debate. Order will be restored. The sentence will be carried out." But order was already slipping. The whispers had become murmurs. The murmurs had become voices. And those voices were beginning to question not just the boy's fate, but the hands that held the gavel. Bang! The gavel slammed again, harder than before. The vibration ran through the wood, through the benches, through the spines of everyone present. The judge's face flushed crimson as he leaned forward, spit catching the corners of his mouth. "Life in prison!" he roared. The words didn't echo, they detonated. One officer yanked the boy's arm so violently the cuffs bit deeper, the chain clinking like broken glass. The other officer shoved his shoulder, forcing him toward the aisle. Gasps burst from the crowd, followed by a low rumble of approval from those who came to see punishment. "Figures," a man muttered, shaking his head with a cruel smile. "Just another one gone." Someone else snickered, phone camera held high. "Make sure you get his face," a voice whispered. "That's the look of a lifer." But there was no such look. The boy's face, calm, centered, unwavering, betrayed nothing but patience. His hoodie creased as he stumbled forward, sneakers squeaking against marble. Yet when he lifted his head, his eyes burned steady, unbroken. The prosecutor spread his arms as if presenting evidence. "There you have it. The system works. Justice delivered." His grin was wide, but his words stumbled over the growing chorus of voices in the gallery. Because not everyone agreed. This isn't right. He didn't even fight back. Why tear into a kid like this? The woman live streaming zoomed closer, her voice trembling but clear. "This is what injustice looks like, Liv. Look at the cuffs. Look at his wrists. He hasn't resisted once." Her feed lit up with comments. "Where's his lawyer? This is insane. He looks so young. This can't be America in 2025. But it island." The judge pounded the gavel once more, furious at the shift. Bang! Bang! "Silence in my courtroom." His hand shook with each strike, the sound less commanding, more desperate. The boy staggered but straightened again, the officer's grip still locked around him. One hissed through clenched teeth, "Keep walking. Don't look back." But he did look back. Not with fear, not with pleading, with stillness, with eyes that met the bench and held it, unblinking as if to say, "You haven't won." The silence returned, heavier now. Even the mocking voices dimmed, unsure. The judge's glare faltered for the briefest moment, the arrogance in his wrinkles cracking. And in that crack, the boy's composure spoke louder than any defense could have. The gallery leaned in, phones hovering like satellites, capturing every tremor of authority, every flicker of imbalance. The story was no longer only about a sentence. It was about what came next. The judge gripped his gavel tighter, knuckles white, lips curling into a snarl. "Remove him, now." The command landed like a final blow. The officers braced, dragging the boy toward the exit. The room buzzed, some triumphant, some horrified, some glued to their screens. The boy let them pull, but his gaze stayed forward, steady, unyielding, because the storm had not yet broken. The officers dragged him 2 steps closer to the door before the boy stopped. Not by stumbling, not by resisting, by choice. The chain of the cuffs went taut, the metal biting into his wrists. One officer hissed, "Move," and shoved harder. But the boy planted his sneakers firmly against the marble floor. Slowly, deliberately, he turned his head. His voice, calm but sharp enough to slice the silence, filled the chamber. "Check my father's name." The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. For a split second, the room froze. The prosecutor blinked, confusion breaking his smug grin. The judge's gavel hovered midair, his lips parting in disbelief. The gallery leaned forward, phones rising higher, red lights recording. "What did he say?" someone whispered. "He said his father's name." The officers exchanged a glance, irritation flickering into unease. "Keep quiet," one muttered, tightening his grip. But the boy didn't flinch, his eyes locked on the bench, voice steady as stone. "You think I belong in chains? Then call up the system you serve, run my last name, see who answers." The murmurs rippled, louder this time. The law student in the back stood halfway, eyes wide. "He's not bluffing." The woman live streaming zoomed closer, breath quickening. "Oh my God, he's about to say it. He's about to blow this open." Comments on her feed erupted. "Say it! Who is he? What's happening?" The judge slammed the gavel, but the sound no longer dominated. Bang! It rattled the wood, but not the boy. "Silence in this courtroom," the judge barked, his voice cracking. Yet silence didn't follow. Instead, the hum of restless voices filled the space, a rising tide the gavel couldn't drown. The boy lifted his chin higher, hoodie slipping slightly to reveal the sharp line of his jaw. His gaze cut through the air like a blade. "You think this is justice?" he said, voice low even. "You think this is order?" The officers pulled again, but hesitation slowed their force. For the first time, doubt hung in their movements. The prosecutor stammered, This is irrelevant. He's stalling. But the crowd wasn't listening anymore. Every phone lens zoomed in, every eye locked on the teenager in gray. He hadn't raised his voice once, yet the room belonged to him. And in that moment, with only a sentence, he shifted the ground beneath their feet. The boy exhaled, slow, steady, deliberate. Then, with a calm that felt heavier than the gavel itself, he spoke again. "Check my father's name." This time, the command didn't just hang in the air, it landed. The judge's knuckles whitened around the gavel. His voice, brittle but still sharp, cracked across the chamber. "Enough games. Remove him at once." The officers pulled again, rougher this time. Chains scraped, shoes screeched against marble. And then he spoke. Not loud, not hurried. Each word weighed like steel. "My father is the United States Attorney General." The room broke. Gasps exploded like glass shattering. Phones shot higher, shaking in hands, suddenly unsure whether to film or simply watch. The prosecutor's face drained of color, lips fumbling for words that refused to come. The judge froze, mouth half open, gavel raised but useless. His eyes darted toward the gallery as though searching for someone to tell him it wasn't true. The officers hesitated. One loosened his grip without realizing it. The other muttered under his breath, "No, no, that can't be." But the boy didn't stop. His voice was calm, steady, cold. "And he's watching this live right now." The live streamer's hand shook, breathless, into her mic. "You heard that, didn't you? Oh my God. Did you hear that?" Her feed exploded with comments. "Attorney General? No way. This is history." The law student stood, voice carrying now. "Check the name. He's not bluffing." The gallery erupted, some voices skeptical, some astonished, some already convinced. The noise swelled, drowning the gavel as the judge pounded it again and again. Bang! Bang! But every strike sounded weaker, more desperate, drowned by the rising storm. The boy raised his cuffed hands slightly, chain rattling like punctuation. His eyes fixed on the bench, unyielding. "You sentenced me to life," he said, tone slicing through the clamor. "But your own career has seconds left." Gasps again, sharper this time. The prosecutor shook his head violently, voice cracking. "Lies! He's lying! Do not listen to him!" But even as he said it, his gaze faltered because deep down, he knew. The judge leaned back, face pale beneath the flush, gavel trembling in his hand. For the first time, silence pressed against his lips. And the boy stood taller, hoodie plain, sneakers scuffed, wrists chained, yet suddenly, unmistakably, the most powerful figure in the room. The gallery erupted again, phones capturing every angle, every second. Because in that instant, the trial ended, and the reckoning began. The silence after his words was thunderous. Phones hovered like a forest of eyes, all recording, all waiting. The gallery seemed to breathe as one, a collective gasp frozen in the air. Then the unraveling began. The judge's hand trembled so violently the gavel slipped, striking the bench with a dull, uneven clack. His face, flushed moments ago, drained to gray. The man who had barked, "Life!" now looked like he'd seen his own verdict handed down. The prosecutor staggered backward, one palm flat against the table for balance. His jaw worked soundlessly before finally spitting, This is irrelevant. He's bluffing." But his voice cracked, rising like a cornered man. The sharp suit no longer looked commanding it, looked like armor too thin to protect him. The officers faltered, their grip weakening. One shifted his weight, eyes darting to the judge for direction. The other pulled back his hand entirely, muttering, "If this is true, we're done." In the gallery, chaos bloomed. Gasps turned to shouts. Some cried out, "It's true, I saw his father on television last night." Others argued, "No, it can't be." But disbelief was losing ground fast. The live stream feed exploded. Comments scrolled faster than the woman could read them. "Holy, he just said Attorney General. I'm watching this in New York. Someone confirm this kid's name. This courtroom is finished. Justice on camera, finally." The law student stood fully now, voice ringing with certainty. "He's not bluffing. I've read the case filings. His last name matches. It's him." His words carried weight knowledge, not speculation. The judge banged the gavel again, but the strikes were hollow, panicked. Bang, bang, order. I demand order. But the courtroom no longer obeyed him. The boy lifted his chained hands slightly, the sound of rattling metal punctuating his calm stance. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply stared, still and unshakable, as the room crumbled around him. The prosecutor tried again, desperation in his tone. "Don't listen to him. He's manipulating you." but his eyes betrayed him, darting, fearful, pleading for someone to take control. No one did. The officers stepped back half a pace, the chain slackening between the boy's wrists. The gallery pressed forward, voices rising, phones glowing brighter, as if the truth itself had been illuminated. And in that moment, it was clear. The balance had shifted. The judge no longer commanded the room. The prosecutor no longer controlled the narrative. Every spotlight, every camera, every gaze belonged to the boy in the gray hoodie, and they all knew it. The boy shifted his weight, cuffs clinking softly. Then, with deliberate calm, he raised his hands just enough for the cameras to see and pulled a phone from his pocket with the help of one officer who no longer resisted. He pressed one button. The line opened instantly. "Dad," he said, voice low but firm, every syllable clear enough to echo in the live stream mics. "Initiate review protocol. Audit this courtroom." The gallery erupted. Shouts clashed with gasps. The woman streaming nearly dropped her phone. "He's calling him! He's actually calling him!" On the other end of the line came a voice, deep and steady. The Attorney General of the United States. The father, confirmed. Protocol engaged. Every syllable carried the weight of law itself. The judge stumbled back in his chair, gavel clattering uselessly against the bench. His lips moved, but no words formed. The prosecutor, face drained to chalk, whispered, "Dear God." Within moments, the courtroom monitors flickered. Notifications pinged. A clerk at the side table gasped as a live message populated across her screen. She read aloud, trembling. "Order from the Department of Justice, suspension of presiding judge effective immediately, pending investigation into procedural misconduct." Gasps ricocheted across the gallery. Phones caught every flicker of shock, every falter of authority. Another ping followed. The clerk's voice cracked as she continued. "Notice of ethics review for prosecutor assigned to this case. Investigation pending." The prosecutor staggered, nearly knocking over his briefcase. "No, this isn't possible. This can't be happening." But it was. The officer stepped back entirely, the chain between the boy's wrists finally slack. One spoke softly, almost apologetic. "Sir, we didn't know." The gallery surged, half standing, half shouting. Some cheered. Others stared in stunned silence. But all knew they were witnessing history in real time. The woman live streaming choked on her words as she narrated. "The judge suspended. The prosecutor under review. Oh my God, this just flipped. This just flipped right in front of us." Her comments scrolled faster than she could read. "Justice live. Never seen anything like it. This is power without shouting." The boy lowered the phone slowly, tucking it back into his pocket. He straightened his shoulders, hoodie falling loose, sneakers planted firm against marble. His eyes swept the room, not angry, not triumphant, but certain. The system that had tried to chain him was now unraveling under its own weight. And every witness in that courtroom knew it. The chamber no longer belonged to the judge. It no longer belonged to the prosecutor, not even to the officers, still standing stiff at the edges of the aisle, unsure if they should move or stay frozen. It belonged to the boy. He stood in the center, wrists still bound by metal but no longer defined by them, gray hoodie loose on his frame, jeans creased, sneakers planted firm against the marble floor. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His stillness was command enough. The gavel lay discarded, silent. The gallery rose like a wave, applause rolling through the room in crashing bursts. At first, scattered claps, then unified thunder. A cheer broke. Someone shouted, "Justice!" Another cried, "We saw it happen." Phones shook in trembling hands, broadcasting to thousands, then tens of thousands, each viewer witnessing the collapse of arrogance into truth. The prosecutor sank into his chair, suit wrinkled, face pale. The judge hunched forward, forehead in his palm, the weight of consequence finally pressing him down. The officers stepped back, no longer pulling, no longer pushing. For the first time, they looked at him not as a prisoner but as someone they had misjudged. The boy lifted his head. His eyes scanned the room once, slow, deliberate. He saw the phones, the witnesses, the law student still standing tall with defiance in his eyes. He let the sound crest and fall into a hush. Then he spoke. "Justice isn't a favor," he said, voice low but echoing in the chamber like iron striking stone. "It's a right, and today you tried to erase mine." The silence that followed wasn't emptiness. It was impact. Then the applause roared again, louder than before, rattling the walls, lifting the air itself. People stood, cheering, some crying, some chanting his words as if they were carved into the room forever. The boy lowered his hands, the chains rattling faintly. A cymbal turned hollow. He exhaled slowly, and then he moved. Not dragged, not forced. He walked. Each step echoed steady against the marble, sneakers scuffing softly. The sound carried by microphones still live. Phones followed his every movement, capturing the boy in gray walking through the aisle like a figure stepping out of history into legend. The heavy doors opened with a groan. Light spilled in from the hallway beyond, golden and bright compared to the cold, artificial glow of the courtroom. And waiting, there were faces, family, friends, people who had never stopped believing, even when the chains closed, even when the verdict thundered. His mother, tears streaking her cheeks, clutching a bouquet of fresh roses. A younger sister, holding carnations with both hands, eyes wide with pride. Friends from school, from the community, their arms full of flowers, their voices breaking with relief. The boy stepped across the threshold. The applause from inside spilled outward, mixing with the cheers from those waiting. Roses and carnations pressed into his arms, petals brushing against the worn cotton of his hoodie. Phones outside joined the chorus, live streams capturing not just victory but reunion. His mother touched his cheek. His sister wrapped her arms around him. He allowed himself a smile, small at first, then fuller, brighter, undeniable. A smile that traveled down the lenses, across the feeds, into the hearts of thousands watching. The boy once dragged, once mocked, once sentenced, walked free, and the world was watching. The cameras lingered as he turned one last time, the doors of the courtroom still open behind him, the echo of applause still alive. His voice, steady as ever, carried out into the hall. You don't give justice, you honor it, and when you try to erase it, it writes itself back. Drop the mic. The crowd roared. The live stream counters spun higher. The image froze in hundreds of screens. A boy in a gray hoodie, arms full of flowers, walking into the light, leaving behind a broken courtroom and a reminder that dignity cannot be chained. And that was the ending the world would not forget.